Hey guys, what's going on? Welcome back to Cedarwood Valley. This is going to be episode 6, and as you can see, we're jumping right into the new parking lot. Yes, this is something that I've been thinking about doing for a long time, and just kind of avoiding it because of the pathing system, number one, and number two, the immense amount of detail I knew would have to go into this. And that is exactly what happened, actually, exactly what I expected. As you can see, I cut out the entire pathing part because who wants to see me screw around with that for a couple of hours? This was one of the longest builds in terms, well, it was the longest build in terms of time I spent playing and time of this actual time-lapse itself, which I sped up to 32 times instead of the usual 8 because I've got so much content in this episode because I was just so in the mood to play Planet Coaster, and I was just feeling the vibe, and I just kept going, creating these little handicap things around here, and I'm going in over here and creating some custom fencing and custom walls for the outside. I've actually been on this little kick of making custom fencing, and kind of the variations in the fence in my park has been changing drastically in terms of what I used to do and then now. I ended up cutting out a ton of footage from not only this part of the build, but from the actual rest of this episode as well, just so I can fit it in some sort of a small timeline that I like to do. But as you can see, I finished the curbing, I finished some of these scenery pieces here with the small flower boxes, and I'm moving on to my second custom wall here. Now, one of the things that I wanted to talk about was this entrance area was actually not designed originally to be, an actual parking lot. That's something that came to me second. And the way that it actually worked out was I knocked out the back of these little ticket booths to the left here, and I connected it all with a huge plaza. Now you can see me, I just made one gate that was an entrance to a staff area, and this is the second entrance to the second staff area that I made. In these little areas, actually the second one that I'm about to move on to was not my favorite of the two. The one that's actually in between the entrance plaza and then this main street, this main street right here. Sorry, I don't know what's wrong with me today. Long day at work. But yeah, so that's the one I actually liked, and the one that we're going to right now that we're looking at, I wasn't as, I don't want to say impressed, but it was just a little bit of clutter, not really too much. This is probably the only time you're ever going to see it. Can't really take pictures of this little alleyway back here. It was just that one little added extra part of realism that I kind of had to have. I don't think I put it in the time lapse, but I put in some custom air conditioning ducts in the top of these as well. Just adding in some things. I only kept this in because I didn't keep in the other one, and just to kind of give you at least some clutter in this episode. So look, there's your clutter for the episode, because you don't have to watch the other one because, I didn't record it. And now we're moving on to one of the larger sections of this build, or of this episode. And this build was inspired by, remember when I said last episode that I wanted to make that restaurant on the hill, and I kind of put up a picture of it? Well, I thought to myself, how the hell are my guests going to get up to this mountain in the background that I've created? And don't you worry, this is actually what I planned all along. And I end up making this some cable cars, and this is going to end up being a sky ride. And it's not going to end up this bluish color, but those are just the colors that I started with these iron girders. And so now you can see me making these little scenery pieces here for the wheels of the cables for the lifts. And now, the reason I split it up half and half like that is actually so I can kind of use this almost as a template, as like a Lego brick is the way I want to describe it, where all I have to do is put in the cables like I am right now, which is just going to be very thick rope, but it gives the impression of cables, and then I'm going to select them all along with that little piece there, and then turn it all together. That way I don't have to fill it around with every single piece individually, and that way I can copy and paste it pretty quickly. You see me going into kind of a peep view here to kind of see what size I want to make these cable cars. Now they're modeled a little bit after the ones at Cedar Point just because they're extremely simple and they're pretty vibrant. And now, at first I want to kind of build these with the scenery pieces but the texture on them just was not right at all. As you know, with the scenery pieces, they're very, very shiny, and in almost every time of the day, at least one of these angles would have been reflecting way too much light and just looking completely white, hanging from the cables, and that is not what I wanted. So I ended up going with this wooden plank texture. Now you can see me going in here and making it very brown and a very bland cable car. I obviously ended up changing that, and I actually had a little bit of problem with doing this because, as you can see, there's a whole bunch of different pieces that make up this cable car. You can see me adding in these posts here to make this sort of makeshift door, and then I end up putting in a little ornament piece as kind of like a doorknob / a handle. And later on in the episode, you can catch like it might be on the screen for a second and a half of the cable cars that are in the station actually have their doors open. So you can see me now going one by one into the pieces and selecting them to color them the other ways. Like I said, it was kind of annoying, but it's just the way the build worked out. And in the end, it wasn't too difficult, and I wasn't too unhappy with doing this sort of thing. It's kind of fun, actually. So yeah, I made 4 different colors, but obviously you don't have to see all of that. We got a lot of other stuff to show you in this episode, so I'm gonna cut out that part. And we ended up going with a red, a yellow, a green, and a blue. I ended up adding in these little Cedarwood Valley signs to every single one, as well as a number plate to every single one, to kind of give in that added, realistic feel. As well as you can see now on the tops, I have that little piece that connects to the cable itself. Now we're going to go into the circular base of this cable car, and I actually kind of made this very quickly, and I don't want to say I was lucky that I liked it so much the first time around, whereas I knew exactly what I wanted, and I just kind of went in with that idea, and it ended up working out quite nicely. Now I built these walls out of door pieces so that I could still make them a pretty low piece count, so my polys wouldn't get too ridiculous at this point. And it actually only ends up being like, I don't know, like 30 pieces for this bottom portion of the receiving end of the cable cars. Now, I do end up putting half of my gazebo top over the top of the actual receiver to the cable cars, and that adds in a whole bunch of pieces, so it's almost worth it that I save a little piece count by using doors instead of just regular wooden pieces. It also saved a lot of time. This entire build took me too many hours. I don't know. There was a lot of footage I didn't even record, a lot of the smaller details, and then actually working on things for my next episode, which is going to be really, really fun one. I don't want to give anything away, but it's going to be something on the lake here, and it took me so long to make. But in the end, I was really, really happy with the way it turned out. So you can see to the left here that I turned a water wheel on its side, and that kind of was going to make the sort of illusion that all of these pieces are moving. I ended up adding a couple gears later on in the process, but obviously these cars aren't going to be moving. There's no sort of animation in this game where I can have my custom scenery pieces moving around. So at first I ended up skipping the part of this building here because it was just very blocky, and like I said, there's a lot I wanted to show you, and there's some things I didn't need to show you. But of course I had to show you the stacking of layers. Yes, it's back again, and this time better than ever. Well, no, not really, but you get my point. I just like to show sort of the minor details that maybe would help you or help me, figure out other ways that I would want to add little pieces to kind of make it a little more fancy, whereas it doesn't take too much time or effort. Although it does take clearly a lot of time for me to decide which window I want to use. Now this wasn't like I said, it was a pretty simple building. I just want to touch it up a little bit, make it a little more fancy. And the reason I wanted to make it simple is because I wanted to have the focus on the cable cars itself. Now I ended up putting up a sign in front of this station entirely, and the entire point for that is to kind of keep the focus on the cable cars themselves, not necessarily the station. Although I still really like the station the way it turns out. Like I said, I pull a piece of my gazebo over and kind of make it like a 3/4 on the top of it. It looks pretty good. But the real emphasis I wanted to put was on these cable cars, because over the water here, it's quite a scene. You can see me here. I'm taking this stone textured wall. I think it's the rugged stone texture. And the reason why I'm doing this instead of like a concrete base like most buildings would be is because of the water wheel. The water wheel prop that I wanted to use to make everything look a little more realistic in the actual turnstile. And so the reason I did that here was to kind of create them to be matching, right? The textures were very, very important in this build. I've been talking about them a lot. It's the reason why I use these metal girders from here instead of planks, and it's the reason I used planks instead of the scenery pieces for the actual cars themselves. I ended up putting in another support structure all the way in the end here. In the blending of these textures actually came together a lot better than I could have thought, because there's metal, there's rope, there's wood, there's stone, but it all kind of comes together in this really weird mix mosh. And then of course gears on the top of it to make the whole thing running. In the end, I liked it so much that I decided to completely copy it and then move it all the way to top. Save myself some time, it's not going to be a very main focal point of this park, the receiving end on the top of the mountain. Although I will spend time on it, it's just not going to be as important as this lower end here that's going to invite guests to come up into what I'm going to be naming it Skyland. So you can see me taking the gazebo pieces apart. I kind of skipped it a little bit, and I had to resize it so that it would fit the apparatus of the building here. And when it comes together, it actually looks like one coherent building when it's really like 6 or 7 kind of separate ones that wouldn't have made any sense to build together just because of the complexity of the angles and the shapes that I wanted to create. So you can see here my laziness getting the better of me, taking that entire building of thousands of pieces, deleting off everything I didn't need and just keeping the top part, and then connecting it, like I said, sort of Lego pieces that I ended up building, and would be pretty easy to reuse in pretty much any park. All you gotta do is change a couple things on them. So now you can see me going into one of the final steps of like the main building part of the cable cars, and it's just kind of placing them all along the line here. I ended up skipping most of this because it was pretty redundant, and the only really thing I was doing was just changing the angle of the connector to the cable, as you can see right there, to make it even with the cable. And so you can see right here, I opened the door so all the peeps can get in. I love that little detail, sorry. But those are the things that make me happy about this game, the things that can, warrant me spending hours on end in this game. So now we're back in this path here, and this is right in front of the receiving end station in the bottom of the mountain. And I wasn't necessarily sick of it, but I had done a lot of foliage, a lot of scenery, and a lot of planters in the middle of paths when I had these. I wanted to make sort of these big open plazas, but it's not very easy to do in this game. So instead of doing planters in the spots where, usually there would be overlapping and you could see the ground in between, I decided to create this. I created this texture that ends up being a compass. Now, the reason that, why would I put a compass in the middle of my park? That's a great question, and here's why. It's the same sort of theme as, the reason that I'm making this nature part of Cedarwood Valley. The Camp Cedarwood, this Skyland that I'm end up creating, and this little compass here is a big connector between the park and Wildcat to the left, and to the right, which is the sky ride to Skyland. It kind of makes that connection between park, path, and then this sort of nature feel that I wanted to have. And it was a pretty easy way of doing it. It wasn't easy, the design actually took a very long time, but it was an easy way and believability to do that. So now I'm going here and I'm creating my custom text, my custom font, and my inspiration for this actually was me just searching on Google mountain font. And now, I don't know if you've ever searched mountain font on Google before, but it's not very helpful. I ended up finding this kind of janky looking font that was kind of interesting, blocky, and had all these funky angles to it, and I really, really liked the way it looked, and I felt like it would fit well in this area of the park. And so the reason that it's called Skyland is because when I was in Virginia, there was that restaurant that I posted a picture of, or put it in the middle of the video last time, was actually that area of of the Shenandoah Valley Park, National Park, was called Skyland. And kind of giving a little homage back to my inspiration for this part of my park would just to completely rip off the name and use it for my own. Pretty romantic, right? Yeah. So anyways, this is actually also sped up like crazy fast because it took me a really long time to orient these scenery pieces in the way that I wanted. And I don't know if you caught it, but I actually ended up losing part of this footage because my Planet Coaster crashed. And my Planet Coaster, I mentioned the most, I think, in the second video about my Planet Coaster crashing. And I still haven't figured out what's going on with it, but I think I know what it is now. Every time that my park tries to autosave, it will kind of like glitch a little bit. And I can feel it getting a little bit more laggy as soon as it goes in. And as soon as I see it start to autosave, are the most common times for it to completely crash on me. So we're actually coming towards the end of this time lapse here with me creating the Skyline Sign. I really actually enjoyed the way that I made this kind of two-tone sign. I don't know how I thought about it because I usually just do kind of shadow boxes, but these were so thick array that I didn't really need to do that. So I ended up creating this sort of two-toned effect that actually came out really well. I actually I hid in a bathroom in this little station area here because people obviously aren't going to come in here unless it's there for a reason, and I want to make it a little more believable. So I just threw in a bathroom. So this is going to be the last thing I do in this time lapse, yeah. But I hope you enjoyed this video, and I hope you enjoyed the cinematics. And I will see you guys next time in Cedarwood Valley.